The Sorcerer got a lot of love under the 2024 rules update, and it's now in contention for one of the most powerful classes in the game. Hello, and welcome to the channel. My name is Nathan, and today we're going to be doing an overview of the Sorcerer class under the 2024 rules update. And as you can see up there, we have a new channel logo that was designed by my sister. I think it's pretty awesome, and we're going to be using it from here on out. So this is the thing that you may see. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump right in here. So here's our agenda for this video. I'm going to give an overview of the Sorcerer class as a whole and what I believe the role of the core class is. Now, importantly, in this video, as with all of my other class overviews, I'm not going to be going deep into what the individual subclasses do, but we're more so covering the core class, although I will give a general gist of what the subclasses do offer the class. Then we're going to discuss class features from level 1 to level 20, and I've broken this out into 5 level sections to make it easier. And specifically for the Sorcerer, a lot of their power is tied up into Metamagic, so I'm going to do a small discussion on all their options and how they've changed. And then after all of our class features, I'll talk about multiclassing the Sorcerer before going into a summary and doing some ratings on the Sorcerer core class as a whole for the 2024 rules. So let's jump in the class overview and role of the Sorcerer. So first, the Sorcerer is a charisma-based full caster. Now the way that Sorcerer's magic and power works is their power comes from some kind of innate power that is inside them. Unlike a wizard, for example, their power comes without study, practice, or really any kind of the precision that a wizard's magic requires. The subclasses that sorcerers have will typically represent their power source and where their power is coming from. So if I just describe their role in a single sentence, I would say the Sorcerer is a backline blaster and controller. They have a pretty good spell list, although it's not the best one in the game, and they also are very squishy, so they naturally want to stay away from damage dealing enemies as much as they can. So one of the cool things about Sorcerers is due to their core class feature in Metamagic, they have powerful, versatile, and unique options for the way that they use their spells. A Sorcerer casting a particular spell is going to be able to do it differently and potentially better than a character of any other class that has access to the same spell. So here is the table of all the Sorcerer's class features, and the Sorcerer has actually seen quite a few changes. So first up here, these are all the features that are new. So at level 1, we have Innate Sorcery. At level 5, we have Sorceress Restoration. And level 7, we have Sorcery Incarnate. And then they got a new class capstone called Arcane Apotheosis. They did lose a couple things. They lost the Magical Guidance feature, which came in level 5. Now, that was a feature from Tasha's. It was not ported over into the 2024 Player's Handbook. You still might be able to use it. Talk to your DM about it. If so, what this does is that if you fail a skill check, you can spend a sorcery point to re-roll. It's not a big deal in terms of combat power, but it is important and helpful for out of combat and skills and that kind of thing. Another thing that Sorcerer has lost was the old capstone Sorceress Restoration, although that has actually been moved into a new feature called Sorceress Restoration at 5th level. So I'll talk about how basically their capstone became that 5th level feature when we get there. Now, here are all the things that have changed, and these are the things I've marked in blue. So they've got some changes to their core spell casting. You may notice they get significantly more prepared spells, as you can see up over there. The old maximum you had at level 20 was 16, I believe, or 15. And so one of the things and the pain points for sorcerers under the 2014 rules was how limited their spell selection was. However, with the 2024 rules update, that is something that has been fixed. Sorcerers, they've also seen some changes to Font of Magic as well as their Metamagic options. They don't get their subclass until level 3, and you also get more Metamagic options as you get to higher levels. All right, so class features beginning here at level 1. So the primary ability of the Sorcerer is Charisma. This isn't a new thing, but something they noted in the new books. This is the ability score you need at least 13 in to multiclass into or out of Sorcerer. They have a D6 hit dice, which is the smallest in the game. They're proficient in Constitution and Charisma saving throws. As a caster who wants to be concentrating on spells, having proficiency in Constitution saves is a great thing, and Sorcerers are the only full caster class that naturally has this save proficiency. They're proficient in 2 skills off the following list: Arcana, Deception, Insight, Intimidation, Persuasion, and Religion. A potentially useful set, and combined with your background, you should have a character that hopefully fulfills a skill niche in your party. They're proficient with simple weapons, and no tools and no armor. One of the interesting thing here, there is one change here. Sorcerers now get proficiency with all simple weapons rather than a smaller curated list like they had under the 2014 rules. So as you can see, with the smallest hit dice in the game and no armor proficiencies, you can tell that one of the big weaknesses of the Sorcerer is going to be their durability. All right, oh, that's not the right slide. Okay, so at level 1, the first feature that sorcerers get, and really is their core thing, is spell casting. So the primary ability of the sorcerer they use to spell cast to determine your save DC and your attack bonus is charisma. They can use an arcane focus as a casting focus for their spells, and they can start out with 4 cantrips. This is the most of any class, and they can replace 1 every time they level up. You also get 2 prepared spells, and you can replace 1 on level up and have 2 first level slots as a full caster. Now, functionally, even though they got rid of known casters under the 2024 rules, Sorcerer still functions the same way as a known caster in that you can't change your prepared spells unless you level up, unlike something like a Druid or a Cleric who can change them all out on a long rest, or even a Wizard. At this level, our spell count is the same as it was under the 2014 rules, but it's going to rapidly climb and eclipse that total. Additionally, at Level 1, sorcerers get a new feature called Innate Sorcery that you can use twice per long rest. So as a bonus action, you can activate it, and for 1 minute, you gain the following benefits. The spell save DC of all your sorcerer spells increases by 1, and you have advantage on the attack rolls with sorcerer spells you cast. Now, this is a very strong and impactful feature, and is one of the great things that Sorcerer has gotten to improve them. The biggest bump here is probably going to be for the attack rolls for your cantrip damage. It is very helpful. However, the spell save DC boost is equivalent to getting +2 to your charisma score and is not insignificant. Additionally, some of your later features will require this feature to be active. One of the other things that's important to hear is this only works for spells that you get from the Sorcerer class. Even if you get a spell from another class that's on the Sorcerer list, unless you've got that spell from Sorcerer, it's not a Sorcerer spell. So when you multi-class with a Sorcerer later, one of the things I'll talk about is how well you can actually take advantage of Innate Sorcery, and it's something important to consider. But this is a big boost to Sorcerers overall. Moving on to level 2, we're up to 4 prepared spells, and we're starting to get more at this point. And we get Font of Magic, and we get sorcery points equal to our level, and we can't ever have more sorcery points than this maximum. We also gain flexible casting here, which is something that the sorcerers can use to convert sorcery points to spell slots and vice versa. So if you want to convert your slots into sorcery points, you can do it at a 1-to-1 ratio, so a first level slot is 1 point and so forth. And importantly, under the 2024 rules, this doesn't require any action economy. If you want to convert sorcery points into spell slots, it takes a bonus action. They both used to take a bonus action before. If you want to make a first or a second level spell slot, it costs a slot level +1 in sorcery points, and anything 3rd to 5th costs a slot level +2. Now, one thing they did clarify here, all the slot creation mechanics now have a prerequisite of actually having enough sorcerer levels to actually have that slot. So they added a column to the table that says minimum sorcerer level. There used to be a loophole under the 2014 rules that was possible level 6 to 8, where you could use your sorcery points to create a slot that was higher level than you would have normally, and they have closed that. Also here at level 2, sorcerers get Metamagic that used to come at level 3, and we get to know 2 Metamagic options and can swap 1 out per level up. And again, we can only use 1 Metamagic option per spell that we cast unless the option says otherwise. Now, the options importantly have changed, and we're going to go through them a little bit in depth here. So here are all the options in the list. So the first one up is Careful Spell. And what this one does is that when we cast a sorcerer spell or not just a sorcerer spell, when we cast a spell that has an area of effect, we can choose, we can spend 1 sorcery point and choose a number of allies in that area equal to up to our charisma modifier. Those allies automatically pass the save against that spell, and if the spell allowed them to take half damage on a successful save, they instead take no damage. The taking no damage thing is new and is a buff. A distant spell lets you extend the range of a touch spell out to 30 feet, or doubles the range of a spell that had range otherwise. No changes there. Empowered Spell, this is one that allows you to reroll damage dice up to your charisma modifier, and the ones with the asterisks here are ones you can use in addition to other options. No change on that one. Extended Spell costs 1 sorcery point and lets you double the duration of any spell that has a duration of 1 minute or more. Now, they did add one thing to this in the 2024 rules. It now gives you advantage on concentration saves if the spell requires it, if you extend it. So, for example, if you extended something like a hypnotic pattern, you'd have advantage on your concentration checks to maintain it, and it would last twice as long. Then we have Heightened Spell, and this used to cost 3 sorcery points. It now costs 2. And now it gives one target disadvantage on all saves against the spell, not just the first. This is an important change. Not only is this better, but it's also much cheaper. So one of the things that you can potentially do with this is you can say heighten a hold monster, and the target gets disadvantage on all their saves against that, and you can potentially lock them down. Again, very powerful, and makes the sorcerer spells that do require saves, you can potentially make those very effective. Then we have Quicken Spell. This hasn't really changed. Well, what it allows you to do is spend 2 sorcery points to change the casting time of a spell that normally costs an action to a bonus action. However, they have added a stipulation with the new casting rules, so you can't quicken a spell if you've already cast a spell of level 1 or higher that turn, and you can't cast a spell of level 1 or higher later in the turn after using Quicken Spell. So basically, you can't use this to pump out multiple high-level spells on a turn. Now, you don't get to exceed the 1 spell with a slot per turn anyway, but if you had a class feature that, say, enabled you to cast a high-level spell without spending a slot, you wouldn't be able to combo that. So if you want to cast a leveled spell and quicken in the same turn, you basically need to quicken the leveled spell. Then we have Seeking Spell. This allows you to spend 1 sorcery point now, used to be 2, to reroll an attack roll that you missed, and this is this other one that you can use in conjunction with any other option. Then we have Subtle Spell. For 1 sorcery point, you can ignore all verbal, somatic, and material components. It used to just be verbal and somatic, but you don't get to ignore material components that have costs or are consumed by the casting. Now, one of the important things here is that if a spell has no components, you can't actually tell that it goes off. The effect just happens, and so a spell that has no visible components actually can't be counterspelled. So that, and also casting a spell without verbal components won't break hiding if that's something that your sorcerer is doing. The next one is Transmuted Spell. So for 1 sorcery point, if a spell does, I believe it's Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, or Thunder, I believe, you can change its damage type to one of the other ones on that list. So basically all the elemental damage types. And this can be useful if your sorcerer specializes in a single type of damage and you encounter an enemy that is resistant or immune to that damage, you can change it to something that'll be more effective. And the last one is Twin Spell. So Twin Spell used to cost a number of sorcery points equal to the level you cast the spell at, and if it was a spell that had a single target, you get to pick a second target. What it does now is it costs 1 sorcery point, but it only works with spells that upcast to target additional creatures, and if you twin one of those spells, it increases the effective level that spell is cast at by 1. Now, this change to Twin Spell is a big deal. One of the things that sorcerers could do under the 2014 rules is twin kind of buff support spells like haste or greater invisibility and that kind of thing, and you can't do that anymore. However, what this is efficient with now is with spells like Hold Person, Hold Monster, Tasha's Mind Whip, Command, these kind of control spells that upcast to target additional creatures. You can twin them and target additional creatures for a much cheaper overall resource cost than using a high-level slot. So it's basically kind of an efficiency type thing here to use Twin Spell. All right. So that's all the magic options. Remember, your sorcerer will get 2 here at level 2. Moving on to level 3, sorcerers get their subclass, and there are 4 subclasses presented in the 2024 Player's Handbook. So you've got the Aberrant Sorcerer, the Clockwork Sorcerer, the Draconic Sorcerer, and the Wild Magic Sorcerer. Now, all of these subclasses, other than Wild Magic, get a spell list. And importantly, you get these spells always prepared, which is fantastic. That adds some additional flexibility to that already expended number of prepared spells that we got. And importantly, Aberrant and Clockwork were actually in Tasha's. They got brought over to the 2024 rules and then got slightly nerfed. So the main thing that got nerfed on both these subclasses is you can't retrain the subclass spells. In terms of themes, Aberrant Mind is kind of psionic. You might have powers from a tadpole or something like that, like a Mind Flayer tadpole. Clockwork, you're tied into the natural powers of order and potentially the plane of Mechanus. Draconic, your sorcerer's power comes from draconic blood in your veins and a bloodline, and Wild Magic, you just have uncontrolled wild magic in your veins. Now, all these, again, classes, they give you some kind of initial feature that kind of works with the core themes. Importantly, even though Draconic and Wild Magic were in the 2014 Player's Handbook, they have seen some reworks and improvements and are generally much better than they were before. Moving on to level 4, sorcerers get their first ability score improvement or feat, and they follow the normal schedule. No changes here. In terms of the feats that you're probably going to want as a sorcerer, you're typically looking for feats that are going to boost your charisma first, and then once your charisma is capped, you're going to look for things that provide utility or improve your character's defenses. Moving on to level 5, the subclasses that grant spells will get you 3rd level spells, and we get a new feature called Sorceress Restoration. Now, this used to be the capstone of the class, and what the old capstone did is whenever we finished a short rest, we regained 4 expended sorcery points. What this new level 5 feature does is once per long rest, when we finish a short rest, we can regain expended sorcery points equal to half our sorcerer level rounded down. So now at this level, we essentially have 7 sorcery points per long rest, assuming that we are going to get a short rest. So one of the cool things is that not only is Metamagic cheaper, but with this feature, sorcerers now get more sorcery points to use with it. And one of the big challenges of the 2014 Sorcerer was resource management, especially if you had a lot of encounters per day. You would potentially run out of spell slots and sorcery points relatively quickly, or you had to be very judicious about when to use them. And with the 2024 Sorcerer, you get a lot more resources, which generally makes that problem a lot easier. One of the cool things is if you were only getting 1 short rest per long rest, this feature is equivalent to the old capstone at character level 8, which is pretty cool. Moving on to level 6, all you get here is a subclass feature in addition to more some more spells. The features at this level are usually pretty decent and kind of lean into the core themes of the subclass. At level 7, you get your 4th level subclass spells and a new feature called Sorcery Incarnate. So what this does is that if we have no uses of innate sorcery left, that kind of core important thing to our class that gives us +1 spell save DC, an advantage on attack rolls with sorcerer's spells that we cast. If we have no uses of that feature left, we can use it if we just spend 2 sorcery points when we take the bonus action to activate it. Additionally, while innate sorcery is active, you can use up to 2 metamagic options on each spell that we cast, and that might be potentially boosted to 3 if you used empowered or seeking spell. This is an excellent feature in my opinion and is very worth spending sorcery points on, especially if your character relies on innate sorcery. Now, you still have to, pay the sorcery points when you're using both metamagic options, and you honestly might not have 2 options that you want to use every time here at this level, because at this point we only have 2 options, but you will eventually have those very soon. Moving on to level 8, it is our second ability score improvement or feat and nothing else other than, some more prepared spells, some more spell slots. At this point, you're probably either capping your charisma or potentially getting another charisma general feat, depending on how you allocated your scores and when you did at level 4. Moving on to level 9, 5th level subclass spells if your subclass gets them, and you get 2 additional prepared spells here, and 5th level spells are quite powerful. Now, one of the things I didn't mention at the beginning with the sorcerer spell list, the general gist of the sorcerer spell list encompasses 3 core things. Blasting, whether it's single target or area of effect. You have some abjuration and defensive magic. They've got all the premiums like shield, absorb elements, and silvery barbs if your table allows it, and then control spells. Sorcerer has a lot of good control spells, although they lack some of the premium options like Wall of Force, unless your subclass gives you that. There are also a few various utility pieces sprinkled here and there throughout their list. You've got things like Enhanced Ability or Haste, invisibility, greater invisibility. They've got some teleport spells. So they basically, in a way, have a subset of the wizard list, but don't have a lot of their peak utility things. One of the other important things about the sorcerer spellcasting is that they do have some ritual options on their list, and since anyone can cast spells as rituals now if the spell has the ritual tag, this is an additional boon to sorcerers, although again they don't actually have a super huge number of powerful rituals available, and even though we have more prepared spells, you may not be able to fit some of those utility rituals onto your character, even though you might want to. Moving on to level 10, we'd get 2 additional metamagic options here, upping our total to 4. You used to only get 1 here, which would be a total of 3. So now we should have enough metamagic options to be able to get good use out of the 2 options per spell from Sorcery Incarnate. An example of something that you might do here is Hold Monster is a 5th level spell. You could twin it to target 2 targets with just a 5th level spell slot and heighten it against one of those targets to give them disadvantage on all their saves. That is a potential option that you could do with Sorcery Incarnate, and is potentially a pretty powerful thing. At level 11, sorcerers get no features here other than 6th level spells, which are quite powerful. However, it's important to note that you can't make more 6th level slots with Font of Magic. If you have spells that you want to upcast over level 5, especially if they're ones that work with Twin Spell, I think you probably want to get Twin Spell as a sorcerer. Moving on to level 12, it is just your 3rd ability score improvement or feat. No new prepared spells this level, no new spell slots. And as we've seen with a lot of our last class overviews, this is the universally sucky level where a lot of classes basically don't get anything, even full casters, other than a feat. Now at this point, what you're probably doing with this feat, if you took 2 charisma general feats and started out with 17, you'd be at 19 before this. So at this point, you should be either capping charisma with another general feat or diversifying into defenses and utility. You might want to boost your wisdom save or take a feat like Mage Slayer to support your mental resilience. Maybe you boost your dexterity to boost your armor class or something like that. Those are things that you should be considering from here on out with future ability score improvements. Level 13, no features, just 7th level spells and slots. Level 14, we get another subclass feature, and that's all that we get here. However, the features that subclasses get from Sorcerer level 14 are typically strong to very strong. I think of, for example, Clockwork Sorcerer's level 14 feature is very, very powerful. Level 15, it is no features once again, just 8th level spells and an 8th level slot, much like levels 11 and 13. So the kind of window from level 11 to 15, this kind of tier 3 window, you basically have 2 levels in 12 and 14 that grant you no spells, and you get a feat and a subclass feature, and then you have 3 levels that grant you no features but just some spells. So while the sorcerer has seen some growth, it's not necessarily a huge amount here, although the power of those high level spells cannot be discounted by any means. At level 16, it is the 4th ability score improvement or feat and nothing else. Again, much like level 12, and for a lot of full casters, this level is like level 12. At level 17, we now have access to 9th level spells, which is a massive spike. Sorcerers do get access to Wish, which means you potentially can cast any spell in the game at this point. And we get our final bump to our Metamagic count. We're up to 6 options. At this point, you probably have some luxury options. And remember, one of the cool things about Metamagic is that you're not locked in. Every time you gain a level, you can swap out an option. So you should be very much set to have a wide variety of things you can do with your Metamagic at this level. At level 18, it is the final subclass feature, the subclass capstone, and these are typically very, very good. At level 19 is our 5th and final ability score improvement, and at this point, our character is a high enough level where we could potentially take an epic boon feat. The epic boon feats are very powerful, and the one that you should take, it really is going to depend on your campaign and how your character is doing and what the other characters in your class are doing. I would probably get one that would boost my spellcasting stat, especially if you're considering going beyond level 20, which means you might be able to get more, and you could potentially get your charisma to a value over 20. Finally, at level 20 is the Sorcerer class capstone. This is new, called Arcane Apotheosis. So what this says is that while innate sorcery is active, we can use one Metamagic option on each of our turns without spending sorcery points on it. And honestly, I think this new capstone is great. Our old capstone, the old Sorcerer's Restoration was just 4 sorcery points per short rest, and we've basically had this with a feature that shared the same name since level 5. However, that said, this feature is honestly more of a resource conservation thing than anything. This is going to save you 1 to 2 sorcery points per round in combat. So you're not going to see much impact if you're only playing a few encounters per short rest. For example, if you were playing, 1 encounter per short rest, that encounter lasted 4 rounds, and you were using 2 sorcery points per 2 Metamagic options that each cost 2, you would use up 16 sorcery points, and you have 20, you would not see any, you would not actually see any boost with this class feature in that situation. And again, if you had that happen if you had a short rest in the second encounter, you would have 14. You might see a slight boost out of this if you had a second encounter and we're going, with 4 sorcery points spent per turn. But again, I think that this feature is good. It's very fun. But that said, its usefulness depends on how many encounters you're going to be playing per long rest and whether or not you actually need all those extra sorcery points that this feature technically provides. All right, so let's talk about multiclassing the Sorcerer. So the minimum ability score that you need to take a level in Sorcerer, if it's not your first class, or take a level outside of Sorcerer, is 13 Charisma. And if you take a level in Sorcerer and it's not your first class, you don't get any additional proficiencies. Nothing new here. So, in my opinion, what does Sorcerer go best with? And in my opinion, it goes best with Bard, Paladin, and Warlock. These are all the other charisma-based classes. These classes can dip into Sorcerer, or Sorcerer can dip into them. For example, if you want to get armor, you can dip into Paladin, or potentially start at Paladin level 1 to get heavy armor. Although this will cost you your Constitution saves. The Sorlock, the Sorcerer Warlock combination, is still quite good, even though innate sorcery doesn't actually work with Eldritch Blast. That said, Eldritch Blast with a couple invocations still does more damage than any sorcerer attack cantrip, even with advantage, so it's still very good. And obviously Bard, getting defensive spells and some of the other cool options and like Metamagic that a sorcerer offers is going to be very good. That said, a main sorcerer may not want to dip as much in Bard unless you're going to take a fair number of levels, unless you really need that out of combat utility. Now that said, there are a lot of other classes that Sorcerer can work with. I think Sorcerer can also work with Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Ranger, Rogue, and Wizard. So a lot of these are actually just to get armor proficiencies, which will fix one of the Sorcerer's major issues in their durability thanks to their low AC. So if you dip Cleric or Druid, you can get medium or potentially heavy armor. You can also get that from Fighter, and if you start with Fighter, you can get heavy armor and Constitution saves. If you dip into Ranger, now one of the interesting things with Ranger is it's basically the same stat cost as dipping into Cleric and Druid, because it's going to take 13 Dex and 13 Wisdom, but you're probably going to have 14 Dex for the medium armor anyway, so it's just a 13 Wisdom cost. So dipping into any of those will give you medium armor, but it won't cost you any of your slot progression, because Rangers as a half caster now contribute their levels rounded up. So a Ranger Sorcerer, if you dipped Ranger, you get weapon masteries on your Sorcerer, and could be a potentially interesting option. One of the cool things that you can do with Rogue, as I have done with my Draconic Trickster build video, and you can see a link to that up there, is with innate sorcery, if you cast a sorcerer spell like True Strike that makes a weapon attack, you can always qualify for sneak attack. Additionally, you can quicken spell to be able to attack as a bonus action with that True Strike, freeing up your action to hold an action with the ready action to take another shot on someone else's turn and potentially allow you to sneak attack again. And that's kind of the core synergy I used on that build, and it's an interesting thing that you can do with a sorcerer rogue in particular. Clerics, Druids, and Wizards potentially might want to start with a Sorcerer dip for Constitution saving throws and potentially Metamagic later. That said, with Magic Initiate Wizard in the game, I don't think that those classes dipping into Sorcerer for defensive spells is necessarily as good, but it still is an option. So a Sorcerer primary build when they're multiclassing is mainly looking to solve durability issues. Other classes can benefit from the defensive spells that Sorcerer has at their low levels, potentially Constitution saving throws if you start in Sorcerer. Maybe you want some of their cantrips like True Strike and that kind of thing. Maybe you want to leverage some kind of combo with innate sorcery using a Sorcerer spell, importantly. So there's a lot of interesting things that you can do with Sorcerer, and overall they're a very effective class that can work with almost any other class in the game. All right, so let's go into our summary and ratings. So here are the ratings that I gave the class in 2014. A 4 in offense, a 2 in defense, a 4 in control, a 3 in support, 2 in skills, and a complexity of 4. So with the changes to the Sorcerer in the 2024 rules, how do I think they did? So offense, this is a measure of the character's ability to deal damage and that kind of thing. Now, I'm still going to give the Sorcerer a 4 stars here, but in my opinion, it's a 4+. So it's kind of like a 4.5. Having more resources and the innate sorcery ability help a lot here. One of the things that potentially hurts sorcerers is they don't have a lot of good concentration damage per round options like summons and that kind of thing, although some of the subclasses do fix this. Additionally, in situations with just the base class, when you're going to be doing high damage output, those are typically very resource intensive solutions and may not be practical at tables where you have more than one encounter per long rest. I think a fair amount of time there are, there's a decent amount of tables that only play that way, but at tables that have more encounters than one, sorcerers have to be a little bit more judicious about how to use their resources, even though the 2024 rules gave them more. Next up is defense, and this is kind of their overall durability of the class, and I'm still going to give them 2 stars. Even though they don't have many hit points and their AC is typically low, they have the basically full suite of defensive spells with things like Shield, Absorb Elements if you're allowed to use Xanathars, Mirror Image, Silvery Barbs if you're allowed to use that spell, Mage Armor, Counterspell. So these help their defensive abilities, although they're still not that great, but they help, and so that's why this is not a 1 star. Now, control. I'm going to give the sorcerer 5 stars for control under the 2024 rules. And I went back and forth on this because one of the reasons I gave them 4 stars under the 2014 rules is they lacked a lot of premium control options with things like Wall of Force that the wizard had that the sorcerer did not. However, that being said, I think their control is better thanks to innate sorcery. They should have the best spell save DC of any class in the game, assuming stats and items are the same, and they have heightened spell, which is much better. Because sorcerer spells rely on saves, you can potentially struggle versus monsters that have a legendary resistance, and spells like Wall of Force can get around that. But that said, for spells that require a save, sorcerers can land these spells better than any other class, and they do have really potent options, for example, Twin Spell. So I think if I'm going to give, I don't think it's fair to give the class that is the best at casting a given spell. If it's on their list, they're better at casting it than any other class in the game. So I don't think it's fair to, give that class not a 5 stars here because, they're going to be comparable to a wizard in a way. The wizard is going to have to use those premium options to keep up with what a sorcerer can do with spells that are common. So, I'm going to give the sorcerer 5 stars on control for 2024. Next up is support, and I'm going to drop their rating from 3 to 2. And you might be asking why, and the main reason are the changes to Twin Spell. They still have some really great support spells, but not being able to twin something like Haste or Greater Invisibility is a significant nerf to that kind of support buffing style of sorcerer play. They still have, teleports, and they can cast those spells on their allies, so it's not terrible, but they don't have healing and that kind of thing. And the Metamagic options don't really support very well kind of that support playstyle instead of something that's like control or blasting. Moving on to skills, I'm still going to give them a 2 here. I think their skills are a little worse than they were under 2014 if magical guidance isn't allowed. But that said, because of the additional prepared spells, the sorcerer still has a lot of room for strong utility spells, and you've got some room on your list to take them now. So if you got magical guidance and picked the right spells, I potentially would consider this a 3 if your sorcerer allows, if your DM allows you to use magical guidance. But as such, I feel like it's kind of a net wash. And the final rating here is complexity. And complexity is a measure of how difficult the class is to play, and is related to how many choices there are and how difficult those choices are. Now, I gave them a 4 in 2014. I'm actually going to give them a 3 in 2024, which means they're an easier class to play. I would say they're easier to play now, even though there are more things to do. Because you have more prepared spells, that's less pressure on your selection, which means there's more freedom to make mistakes, and you can have some of those kind of back pocket options. All the Metamagic options being generally cheaper than they were in 2014, especially with the other things that give you more sorcery points, means you can use them more freely now. You still need to be, somewhat smart with your spells and Metamagic choices, but I feel like there's a lot less pressure overall on the sorcerer to make the right choices or suck. So this has been our class overview on the 2024 Sorcerer. Thanks for watching. I'm very curious to know what you think of the Sorcerer and what you thought of the things I presented in this video. Now, the Sorcerer got the most buffs of any full caster, and in my opinion is in contention for the best class in the game. I think potentially competing with Wizard. The two classes are different, and it's not an apples to orange. It's not an apples to apples comparison. Additionally, the subclass reworks to sorcerers are significant and do a lot to help the class, and I hope to cover those in future videos. And our next class overview is going to be on Ranger, unless you guys mentioned something in the comments about really wanting something else. The Ranger has been pretty contentious, and I think I've got some strong opinions about the Ranger, so it should be an interesting one. So thanks for watching. Once again, my name is Nathan, and I will see you next time.